All right, good afternoon and welcome to this afternoon's podcast. Today I have a very distinguished guest with me. I've been getting some feedback, and the feedback has been to talk about things besides real estate and finance, and I thought I'd talk to somebody who has a lot to offer. So my distinguished guest today is Alfred Mazza. Al, welcome to the podcast today.
Good to be here.
Yeah, glad to have you. Well, somebody might ask you, well, why did you bring Al in? Well, Al is proudly 95 years old, and someone who's made that accomplishment in life has a lot to talk about. If you think about what's happened in the last 95 years in this country, in this world, boy, this gentleman's seen a lot. So I thought it'd be interesting to bring you in today, and we'll just kind of go through a few things and talk about life a little bit, right?
Sure.
All right, cool. And I just want to, for my viewers, let them know that Al is not a professional. He's not being paid for this. All right. Al, where were you born? Where are you from?
Actually, I was born on Mott Street in East New York.
Okay.
East New York in Manhattan. And when I was very young, I moved to 4th Street, which isn't very far from Mott Street.
No.
And I was living there for about 13, 14 years.
So you grew up there as an adolescent. You became a young teenager. Then where did you move to from Lower Manhattan?
Well, I originally lived at 60 East 4th Street.
I can't even believe you remember the address, first of all.
For a number of years, of those 13 years. And then maybe the last 5 or 6 years, we moved across the street to 63. And the reason that we moved to 63, it was a slightly more modern apartment. It actually had the toilet that we used just ourselves as a family.
So you had a private bathroom.
We had a private bathroom.
Now, what year is this?
It wasn't actually a bathroom.
Okay.
Because it was just the toilet.
Just the toilet.
Yeah.
So where was the bathing happening?
The bathing happened in the kitchen with a tub.
Okay.
The tub was in the kitchen.
Okay.
And whether I needed it more than that, but once a week I had to go in the tub.
So when people were taking a bath, did they clear the house?
Yeah, I think that's the way it was.
It's very interesting.
And in the original apartment on 60 East 4th Street, it was a shared bath. It was a shared toilet with another family.
So we're talking around late 30s, late 1930s?
I was born in 28, so I lived there till a little bit after the 1940.
All right.
Just about the beginning of the war.
And tell us the truth. Were there traffic jams in Manhattan back then?
No, but an interesting thing that you maybe remember now is that I remember the winters, the snow would accumulate on the street to the point where it wouldn't necessarily be from the sun run off as water. And usually in the spring, we were left with a coating of maybe an inch or two of ice on the street because there was very little traffic.
So just packed up and got condensed over the
higher
winter?
and higher. And a fire hose would be used to break up the ice.
So at this point on the street, there are some automotive vehicles, but there are also horses?
Definitely.
Wow, what a crazy time that must have been,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
So you saw the automobile just take over and push the horses out. I mean, really.
Well, in those early days, living where I was living at that point, there was very little ownership of cars.
Sure.
We definitely did not have a car in the family.
Right. You were thrilled just to have a bathroom, a toilet in the apartment.
Yeah.
So where did you move to when you left Manhattan?
Astoria.
Astoria. Okay. Again, with your whole family at this point?
That's correct.
Okay. And how many brothers and sisters did you have?
When I was living as a youngster in Manhattan, I had 4 sisters and 2 brothers. And maybe I was 4, 5, 6 years old. By that point, I was the youngest in the family, so my 2 older sisters became married. So at the point where we moved to Astoria, we were just 2 sisters, 2 brothers, and myself.
Okay, got it.
And also when we moved to Astoria, the war was just about starting, and that brought my 2 brothers into
World
the
War
war.
II.
World War II.
Okay, Charlie, can you post a picture of Mom and Dad, please? So, I wanted to ask you about your mother and father.
Yeah.
What would there have been, mom would have been a stay-at-home mom then, right?
Excuse me?
Your mother would have been a stay-at-home. She didn't work probably, right?
Definitely.
Right, okay. What did your father do?
While you're on the subject of my mother, could
Yeah.
I just bring up one thing?
Yeah.
All of the children that she had, and there were a total of 8, 7 survived, but there were 4 sisters, 4 girls, and they were the firstborn, and then the 3 boys, of which I was the last. All of us were born outside of a hospital with a midwife.
Yeah. That's common.
Yeah.
That's common. So today, when we hear about the doctors giving instructions, you got to put the baby on his side for 3 hours and turn him off. How do we all survive? None of those rules existed
Don't ask
then.
me.
I know.
But anyway, to the father,
Yeah, what'd your dad do?
he was a longshoreman,
Huh?
and in those days, I don't know if you remember this or not, but they used to appear for work. They weren't hired as employees permanent.
Right.
They
Day labor? Like a day labor?
They were selected.
Yeah.
You come in, you come in, you come in.
Yeah. Interesting. Your dad was born where?
He was born in Italy,
Which part of Italy?
in the Calabria region of
Okay.
Italy.
Okay.
And as far as I know, he came over here very young. Now, by very young, I can't do better than that.
Okay. And your mom was born where? Same place?
No, she was born in the States here.
Oh, did they meet here then? They met
Yes.
here? Okay.
Yeah.
So,
And an interesting thing about my mom, she could neither write, well, she could not write, and she could not read. In other words, like I would go shopping with her. She had an uncanny way of shopping. I don't know how she did it, but she would pick out the exact thing that she wanted. If it was to be sweetened or unsweetened, she would go by colors.
okay. So she learned the
She had-
pictures,
and she had absolutely no problem with money.
right?
In other words, she handled her money, she did her shopping, but she could not write her name, you know.
So was she born in Manhattan also?
I don't know.
You don't
where
know?
she was born.
Okay.
I don't know where the two of them were
And
born.
did your dad speak English when you were growing up?
Yeah.
So he's,
English was the language in the house.
it was a language in the house, so, okay. So he adapted
And
pretty
again, I
well.
was the youngest in the family,
All right.
and that was during the realm of the Depression.
Yeah.
So I made my appearance near the end of the Depression, like, you know,
Okay.
or when it first got started.
And they were probably thinking another mouth to feed,
Well,
right? At
that's
that
about
point?
the size of it. Well, because of the 4 sisters, none of them, only one, the last one born, was the only one that graduated high school. The others maybe saw a year or two, and then immediately they went to work.
Okay. What about the boys? Did all the boys get through high school?
The boys went through high school, but all of us went into vocational high schools. So we did not really have good education
Okay.
at that
Sure.
point.
Let's talk about vocational school. It's not really the same as it is now. I mean, now that people go into hairdressing, they go into auto mechanics and stuff like that. What would a vocational school been for you then?
Okay, I don't remember my oldest brother, what he went into. I really don't. The next brother down the line to me, he went into woodworking.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say that both that middle brother, Pat, and myself easily could have gone into college from a high school. But in those days, college wasn't spoken about in the family.
It's kind of elite, right?
It wasn't an option.
Yeah.
It wasn't an
Yeah,
option.
a very small percentage of people went to college.
I remember with the brother, the second brother that was born, the one just older than me, the one that went to woodworking.
Huh?
The immediate first job that he went to was a woodworking job in a woodworking place. And I think he lasted there a couple of months and he couldn't take the sawdust.
Okay.
And that was the last that he ever saw wood.
Right. Well, what did you do, though? What did you go to school for?
I went to school for the aviation trade. And basically what that turned out to be was building a wingtip out of wood.
Oh, wow. So this is really early in the history of aviation.
Yeah, but that was nothing like what a person going into the aviation trades would be faced with.
So What was you being trained to help build and do construction of the planes?
Well, that was the theory at that point, I guess, that you'd learn something about the aviation trade.
Yeah.
But what they picked on was a wooden wingtip, which at the point where I became an employee of American Airlines, for instance,
Okay.
anything that was planes were being built of metal.
Sure. So you graduated the vocational school, and then took a job with American Airlines. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay. So American Airlines at which location?
LaGuardia.
Did LaGuardia look different then than it looks right now?
Oh, considerably.
Was it like one hangar?
There was a small little terminal building, one terminal building. There were American Airlines had 3 hangars, and each of the airline, there was Eastern, United. They all had a hangar, But it was very, very different than it is now.
What was the job that you took at American Airlines at this point in time?
When I graduated high school, I was 17, and the year was January 1945. And if anybody remembers World War II was still on, and the draft was, you had to register for the draft when you were 18.
Okay.
So in other words, I came out of high school, I was 17, and I had a year before I was going to get drafted.
Okay.
Or I would enlist, and I didn't enlist. So,
Okay.
so I got drafted, and myself and another fella went to LaGuardia Field. We didn't even go to the American Airlines personnel office in Manhattan. We went to LaGuardia Field, and we were hired on the spot
Okay.
because they were looking for manpower. They needed manpower.
So what were you doing?
I was doing maintenance work on the aircraft, but basically for that first year, it was mostly metal work that involved putting antennas on aircraft, making modifications to the aircraft
Yeah.
to get them as current as possible.
So it sounds like this is a real big transition point for airlines, for aircraft to go from that wood into the metal phase and really kind of become more contemporary.
Yeah, but just to give you for instance of why I feel that the vocational school didn't help me at all, I became involved in cutting metal, riveting on the aircraft, riveting on the aircraft. These are things, drilling holes with a drill motor. In fact, when I got hired, one of the radio mechanics, said to me one day, "Come with me, Al. We'll go to the tool room and we'll fit you up with some tools that you're going to need, while you're here." And that's how I got the tools,
All
in the
right.
toolbox.
Okay.
He brought me into the tool room. He said, "You need this, you need this." I said, okay, And
So you did that job for about a year, right?
that's right. And then I turned 18 in January of '46. The war was over. However, the draft continued.
Really?
World War II draft
Yeah.
continued because the soldiers they were tired now. They wanted to come home.
Okay, yeah.
But now we had to go into Germany and into Japan to occupy the countries. You know what I mean?
So
So they needed people, but they did not want us as draftees. And they tried to get us to enlist. However, I wasn't a volunteering type person.
what was the job in the military? What was your
Well,
job?
in the military, we were told when we first were inducted, they did not want us as inductees, as draftees anymore. They wanted us to enlist. But again, I didn't volunteer. And we were told, though, that we were not going to go to school and we could not pick out anything, any service that we wanted. They would assign us.
Okay.
But luckily, because of my work at American Airlines for 1 year as a junior radio mechanic, they gave me a military occupational specialty number as a radio repairman. In other words, as though I had gone to school within the military.
Wow. So you were in the Army,
Army.
and where did you serve? Were you in Germany?
No. I served in the United States. I
You
never
stayed
went overseas.
stateside. Okay.
And I spent a month at basic training in Tulsa, in Oklahoma. I forget the town that I was in.
Yeah.
And from there, they assigned me to Eglin Field, Florida. And that's where I stayed for a year.
Okay.
13 months,
Okay.
actually. And then they let me go in 1947.
All right. So once you finished your military tour, what'd you do next?
I was rehired by American Airlines, and I just continued along in the area. However, at the point where I re-entered American Airlines, the work was getting a little different now. I became first of all, I became a radio mechanic.
Okay.
And I started now to work on the aircraft as a radio mechanic, as opposed to the metal work that I was doing originally.
So what does a radio mechanic do? You're making sure your tubes and knobs and stuff, right? You're making sure the radios are working. You're installing them.
Well, there were two basic jobs that I had. One had to do with maintaining the aircraft in the hangar. In other words, in those days, they would come, and after flying all day, they would be put into the hangar, and there were certain maintenance tasks that had to be done, of which radio was part of it.
Interesting.
And my job in that situation was to check all of the due dates on the equipment. And in those days, the radio equipment, the avionic equipment, was using vacuum tubes. And it was known that the vacuum tubes would wear out. So what they would do is they would put a due date on any new unit that was put into the aircraft, and it would have a 3-month due date on it. And it was my job to go up on the aircraft when it was in the hangar now, being maintained for the night. And anything that was due, I'd have to change and put a new unit in.
All right.
Also, I would check the logbook and see if there was any complaints or how the radio equipment seemed to be working.
It's hard to imagine radio equipment needing maintenance because
Right.
today everything's solid state. It either works or it doesn't work.
Okay, so that was like one part of my job at that time. And the other part was that during the day job hours, and I was working shifts at the time. So if I worked the afternoon and midnight shift, I might do some of that work on the plane. But then when I worked the day shift and the early afternoon shift, my job was to be available to keep the planes flying, even if they had a radio complaint on it. In other words, we would get word in our room, the radio room in the hangar, flight 367 is coming in and there's a radio complaint on it. We need somebody to meet the plane at the gate.
Okay.
So that
So you're on call, kind of.
on call
Yeah.
to go up there, either talk to the captain or the flight engineer, the co-pilot, and look at the logbook and find out what the problem was. And we would have to try and fix the problem,
Did you enjoy the work at the time?
definitely.
Do you ever find it interesting now, at your age, when you drive over to LaGuardia? Do you ever look there in fascination of what it was, what is?
LaGuardia doesn't look anything like it used to.
Not even recognizable.
Hardly.
And you had no traffic getting there.
No. No, the parking used to be right across the street. We would just walk
Oh
in.
my God, we all fantasize about that.
And then the end of my career at American Airlines, it worked out to be that I was an instructor for a while. Now, the reason for that happening was the jets were going to be introduced. And they realized that it wasn't only the propulsion that was going to be changing, but the avionics equipment was now going from the vacuum tube age to the solid state age.
Yeah, sure.
And it was felt that the radio mechanics weren't going to be prepared properly unless they were given some instruction to move them from this one stage to the next stage.
Sure.
And I put my hand up for that.
That was the one thing you volunteered for.
that. However, it was something that you applied for. They tested you for it. And they came to me one day and said, Al, you've been selected, and if you want to accept it, we're willing to take you on as an instructor.
Oh, that's great.
And that changed my life.
So
quite a bit.
how long did you stay there now as an instructor before you moved on from American Airlines?
I was an instructor for probably, I guess, about 5 to 7 years.
It's a good long time.
And what happened toward the end of that time frame, it was felt that any new aircraft that was coming to American Airlines, the avionic equipment was not changing severely enough to require additional training. So the need for the instructors stopped.
Okay.
And I was put back as a radio mechanic.
Okay.
And luckily, at about that time, Grumman was awarded the contract for the lunar module.
Okay.
And I'd say about 6, 7, 8 of the American Airlines who were instructors, one by one, we went to Grumman.
So you applied, or they kind of poached you?
No, we all applied.
Okay.
A couple went at the beginning, and they said, "Why don't you?"
All right, well,
So one by one, we wound up.
the whole Grumman thing is fascinating. Before we go to Grumman, there's another important milestone in your life around LaGuardia, right? So what else happened while you were at LaGuardia Airport?
Yeah.
Did you meet somebody there?
What's that?
Did you meet somebody while you worked at LaGuardia?
Well, my young years were not dating years. I went to an all-boys high school, and I went into an all-boys army. So I didn't really start dating until I was about 20 years old.
Okay.
And when I was about 22, I think, I met Rita. And
Your lovely bride. We have a
That's-
picture up behind you.
that's another little thing that sort of changed my life considerably. It was one of those lucky events. I was lucky that I was hired by American Airlines, I guess. I was lucky that I got drafted. I was lucky that I met Rita. She's a special woman.
Yep, for sure. And I knew Rita very well. How long did you and Rita date before it moved forward to marriage?
3 years.
Okay. So during that time, you then took your job at Grumman. You had met Rita, resigned, and took a job at Grumman? Is that how it went?
That's correct.
Okay. What was Rita doing at LaGuardia when she was working there?
She was working in the radio overhaul shop, which I forgot to mention that ended maybe my last 5 years of working with American Airlines as a radio mechanic.
What, if she's working in a radio overhaul shop, it sounds a little gritty. Doesn't sound like a desk job.
Pardon?
It doesn't sound like it's a desk job. It sounds a little dirty, a little gritty.
Well, no, she was a secretary.
Okay.
And she was the lone woman working for the general foreman in a shop that had about 45, 50 men. And anytime she would work in the shop area, walking through the shop, they'd start whistling.
Of course. Of course. So, here's the uncomfortable question.
Yeah.
Who made the first move in the relationship? Did you ask Rita out, or did she kind of get your attention to ask her out? How did it go?
Well, as it turned out, I was talking to a friend of mine at the time, and he happened to have been on a date with her. He was also a radio mechanic. And I asked him, I said, I guess there was something about Rita that attracted me to her. And I asked him, I said, do you think that Rita would go out with me if I asked her? So he said, sure. He said, go, and so that's what I did. I asked her out to a American Airlines picnic that they were having out on the island.
That's awesome.
And that's how it started.
All right. Terrific. Let's jump over to Grumman.
Okay.
What'd you get hired at Grumman? What was the job when you started?
As an instructor,
Okay. So now this is what year is this? We in the 50s?
1966.
Okay, we're all the way up to the 66. So now we're in the era of going to the moon. And you're working at Grumman on Long Island where almost all of it's happening.
Right.
You're like on the cutting edge of what's about to happen in the world.
Yeah.
1966. So here you are, and you're featured in a newspaper article. What was this article about? Why were you featured?
Well, let me see. Why did I want to interrupt you there for a minute?
Was it like a press conference? Did somebody wanted you to
No,
speak
I
about
just
it?
wanted to indicate that at the point where I started working for Grumman, I did not immediately be assigned, I wasn't immediately assigned to the lunar module
Right.
project.
Right.
At that point, again, this is the time frame of right after World War II, and Grumman was a very young company that supplied many aircraft to the Navy
Yeah.
during World War II.
Right.
And in addition to the Navy aircraft that they had supplied to the Navy, they also got involved in a commercial aircraft that they built, the Gulfstream.
Oh yeah.
And the Gulfstream was the aircraft program for Grumman that I got assigned to when I was hired
Okay.
because of my background with American Airlines.
Okay.
But I was only on that assignment maybe for a couple of weeks, and the head of the training department at Grumman, the director of the training department at Grumman, he came to me and said that there was an opening for an avionics instructor on the lunar module training group. Would I be interested? So I volunteered again. And I was interviewed by the training manager of the lunar module group, and he asked me to do a little presentation for him, and he was satisfied. And he said, we ran into a little problem at Houston on our first go-around with our instructor staff there. And the avionics instructor, Houston got back to Grumman and said they didn't want to see him again.
Okay.
So I was being put into a position of replacing one of the avionics instructor on that team.
When you get assigned to this lunar module thing, did you have the wherewithal at that time to recognize this was about to be huge and big? Did you know it was
That it was what?
going to be so big? Did you know it was going to be?
Oh, yeah,
History
yeah,
changing.
yeah, no.
It was very exciting then.
It was very exciting, but I knew it was going to be very different because when you sort of think about it a little bit, the training instructor job for American Airlines, which is my background, was primarily for maintenance of the aircraft. What I was being told was my training job, my instructor job at Grumman for the lunar module, I was going to be involved with astronauts and flight controllers. Those guys were not hands-on maintenance. What they were operating. So the training was going to be a little different.
The audience is very different.
The audience was extremely different.
I'm sure very demanding, very high, challenging, very intelligent guys asking a lot of questions.
The first time I had to go to Houston, which was maybe about 10 months after I joined the instructor staff there, we received, I don't know how we got it, but received a copy, a copy of the resumes of about 20 instructors that were going to be in our first class. And I was amazed when I read those.
The instructors or astronauts in the class?
I'm sorry, the astronauts.
Astronauts, right.
Astronauts.
You saw the resumes.
Occasionally that
You
happens.
saw the resumes of Alan Shepard and.
No. These were a new group of
Okay.
astronauts that were coming into the program, into the NASA group.
Okay.
And they wanted to give them just a familiarization course on the lunar module, what the mission was, pretty much what the mission was, and to talk about the equipment a little bit. At that point, the lunar module, it hardly had been designed.
Right.
This is the first year.
Sure.
So it was like in its design phase.
So you in a classroom environment teaching the theory about what was about to unfold?
That was my first class
Yeah.
with 20 new astronauts that were going to become astronauts for NASA. They weren't assigned to anything yet.
Right.
And it was, I was a group of maybe 8 fellas that was instructors that were sent to provide that familiarization training. And I tell you, I was concerned and worried and nervous.
For them or for
It
you?
was me. I was very, very concerned about that.
Because of the
But-
stakes were high?
But the the people, the astronauts, these new guys, were extremely good.
Yeah.
They listened,
Yeah.
they asked questions, and they were happy that we gave them what we gave them.
So were you working exclusively in Houston, or were you back and forth? Were they flying you back and forth to train?
No, back and forth.
Oh.
I
It was
was
a lot of
home.
travel.
Yeah.
And Rita put up with that.
Oh, yes. And she had a number of children to put up with, too.
All right. So before we jump to that, I just want to go back and ask you again. Do you remember what this particular picture and newspaper clipping was about? What this?
Okay, this would be later on, and this was still actually before the first flight.
Okay.
But at this particular time, for this particular photo anyway, I not only was an avionics instructor for that peculiar part of their technology, but myself and one other instructor were assigned the job of providing familiarization training courses where needed. And as an avionics instructor, I had to take on some more of the load, like I had to learn air conditioning, I had to learn
wow.
some other stuff.
Yeah.
And the other fellow was like responsible for non-avionic,
Okay.
like propulsion, air conditioning, environmental control, stuff like that. So the two of us would be assigned to different reasons for supplying this familiarization course, and it was just done in a one-day period. He would have maybe 3 hours. I would have 3 hours.
So was this kind of like almost like a press conference, though, talking to the public?
That's correct.
Yeah.
On this particular one where this photo was taken, this was done for the Houston Press Corps.
Okay.
So the people that were in attendance were not NASA people,
Right.
but the press corps
That's very
in
interesting.
Houston.
That's very interesting.
So they just posted it a little bit.
You know, I'm born in '62.
Now, what's interesting is that we gave that FAM course at different times. Like there was one time we had to give it in Washington, D.C. That was given for all of the foreign press corps.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like people from France, Germany, etc.
That's cool.
It was.
It's really cool. You know, I'm born in 1962. So everything then was about going to the moon as a child. You know, I remember in elementary school, they would call an assembly and bring us into the cafeteria to put up a TV to show us the first moonshot and whatnot
Yeah.
going on. So it was really exciting back then.
Very,
really exciting.
very.
All right. We're moving forward.
Good.
We're Grumman. We're married. We're building a family now. So how long did you end up working at Grumman? How many years before you retired?
I worked for American Airlines about 24. I worked for Grumman for about 25.
Okay, that's a long time. So during that time, you're raising a family, right?
Yeah.
So how many children did we bring in? And let's talk about that.
We brought in, my wife Rita gave birth to 7 children. However, one was born severely damaged in the brain, and he only lasted 4 months. So we had 6 surviving children.
Right. And your family, we have a picture up behind you now. It's grown quite big. Got lots of children, lots of marriages, lots of grandchildren coming now.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So-
It's a very large family.
How many grandchildren now?
The grandchildren are 5, and the great-grandchildren are 3, plus 1 on the way.
Very exciting. What did you? When did you retire? How old were you when you retired?
I think it was 63, 62 or 63.
Okay.
But I had worked many years. That wasn't by no means was that an early retirement. I started when I was 17.
Yeah, that's a long time. This is a great picture of you and Rita vacationing, enjoying the beach. What did you do during retirement?
Pardon?
During your retirement, did you do a lot of traveling?
A lot of traveling, definitely.
Maybe a cruise, a couple of cruises?
A couple of cruises. I think the most notable, well, just a lot of travel.
Okay. You know, I've known you and your family for 35 years now. It's a long time.
Yeah.
And, you know, when friends are around so long, they become part of your family. Your son Al has called us family now.
Yeah.
Right? We're family.
Yeah.
So in the 35 years that I've known your family, the picture behind you is indicative of how I know you and Rita. Always there, outdoors. You love to be outdoors. I know you spend a lot of time taking your families with other families, going camping and stuff, and the beach thing. And, you know, God bless, right till Rita's last day, and you to this day still. If the boys are up late at night, we're around a fire, and it's 30 degrees out, you find a way to be there. And if we're outside toasting marshmallows, you're there too.
A very important part of my life, I think, is the fact that after marriage, when we were living in Brentwood, we became very friendly with a number of families there. I'd say that we were maybe 10, 12 families that were very, very friendly. We would go on vacation a lot together. And most importantly, we called ourselves a prayer support group. We were all Catholic, and we called ourselves a prayer support group. But now thinking back, it was mostly a family support group.
Sure.
We would meet once a month. There would always be some involvement with religion, some talking about the gospel, and but it was always talking about what was happening in our lives, and I remember that at one point we decided that during the remainder of meetings that we were going to have, we were going to talk just about how we got to know each other. The individual couples would talk about how we got to know each other. And the first couple that did it marvelously well. I mean, they really searched how to speak about how they met, the problems that they had in their early years of marriage, and what had happened to them as they got to the point where they were saying what their marriage was all about. And each of us sort of had to go through that. And when it was Rita and my turn, that's what we did.
Yeah.
I spoke about my early years. Rita spoke about her early years. She spoke about the fact that they were divorced and her parents. I spoke about the fact how it was all boys until I met Rita.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Sure,
just
sure.
about.
Yeah.
You know, all the and you know, like at that time, Rita's mother was living with us, and it became a challenging thing.
Oh, yeah.
And I remember we were sort of the older ones in the group, Rita and myself. And at some point, the next couple would sort of start saying, "Oh, our mother is going to join us," and you know, like it was that business of talking about what was happening to each of us, and more than anything else, I think that helped me become the person that I am.
Well, I know that the church became an important part of your family life, and it was, you know, everybody held it close to their heart. There's a story that you've told many times about a date that you had with Rita where you drove out east, and you drove past the church.
That was our first date.
That was your first date.
Yeah.
And Rita, you drove out east and into Islip, right? Is that where you were?
We went to, this is where my memory hurts.
It's all right.
Do you know Connecticut, where it goes down to the
Yeah,
water?
yeah.
What's that place down there?
Oh, it's a club, right? A golf
Yeah,
club?
at that
Golf
time,
club.
I think it's called Timber Point.
Yes.
But at that time, it was called the Republican National Club.
Okay.
Something like that.
Okay.
And that's where American Airlines used to have their picnics.
Oh, all right.
So our first date was out in I guess that would be East Islip,
Yeah.
I guess.
So on that first date, you drive by this church, and what does Rita say?
We got to stop in there.
We got to stop in this church. Why? She just liked the way the church looked?
No, what I think what had happened, I think she had to do something. We had gone to the picnic, to the event, and while we were at the event, she had to do something, and that's what brought us back into East Islip. I forget what it was.
Okay.
It had to do with
Yeah.
something. She needed to do something.
Okay.
And as we drove back into East Islip, we passed by the church, and she said, "We got to go in there." And
And this is really where the history starts, because I guess she loved the church enough that you ended up buying a house nearby and raising your family, and this was the church that your family went to for everything.
it still is.
Everything, and it still is. And I've been to that church with you, and I've met some of the priests that have been friendly with your family at your house, so
Yeah.
I know it's a big part of the whole story.
Yeah.
It's a great story. So, listen, I could talk to you for hours, right? You got a lot of history there, but I'm going to wind it up, and I just want to ask you, at the prime age of 95, what are the nuggets you share with your family and your friends? What are some of the nuggets that you share with family and friends about how to approach life, to live a long, healthy life like this?
Well, I think the secret is love. And you gotta love, and you gotta know what love really means. And now that I'm not just talking about your wife. I'm not just talking about your children. I'm talking about your friends.
Yeah.
And when love is part of what's going on, that means you're making more of the person that you're loving at that time, whether it be a friend, you're making them better.
Again, because I know the family and I've been around y'all, what is real obvious is that everybody's welcome in your circle. It's a very honest, open circle, and everybody's welcome regardless of their deficiencies, because none of us are perfect. And one of the reasons I'm so close to your family is not just because I became so close with one of your sons, Alfred. That's just part of it. But the rest of the family has adopted me, and it's because your wife, Rita, brought me in and made me feel part of her family too,
Yeah.
right? And then that bleeds into the brothers, and next thing I'm hanging out with the brothers, and they, well, if you're his friend and my mom says you're here, then you're part of our family, and that's how it happens.
Yeah.
And now my children and my someday grandchildren will be part of this too. So it's a really kind of a wonderful family. I tease your son Al a lot. I say you have a very unusual family. First of all, your father's a freak. He's 95 years old. He walks a couple miles a day every day. He's on top of his game. He has a cocktail at 3:30 in the afternoon, and he really figured it out. And then Al will remind me that it wasn't always that way. He said he wasn't always that way.
No.
But I know that it's about really accepting people and opening your arms up and being charitable and giving. And it seems to come back in spades, isn't it?
And it doesn't really matter where you start off from. Like my beginning would never point you to the place where I ended up.
Right.
But you never know what's happening.
You never know.
And be open to it.
You didn't volunteer too many times in life.
And you got to be a little lucky too. In other words, the people that come into your life are going to affect you.
Well, I think we're all learning now that if we put out good energy, it comes back. And I think that's your family has a legacy of putting out good energy, and it comes back. So, Al, thank you for spending an hour with us today.
My pleasure.
Again, I could talk with you all the time, and I'm sure that our audience will enjoy this, getting to know you a little bit. Okay. You can see the full-length interview on my YouTube channel. Check it out. I'm sure Charlie will post a little bit of this on Instagram and Facebook, and hopefully Al catches that there too. Alfred Mazza, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.